truss.
I see.
And it was recorded on a Nagra, so there's a 2-track master of this, and because of the location of the microphone at the height of the thing, we got a pretty good recording of what this actual audience effect was. And if I ever find that tape, I'll try and stick it in. You can't do that on stage because it's a pretty bizarre event.
Yeah. I imagine that the best place to be able to hear that is front center on the stage. That it seems to be, all the sound kind of seems to be directed towards that place.
Well, probably no. Probably the best place to hear it would be maybe 30 feet ahead of where I stand, out over the audience, up high, and then you get a better global picture of it. Because where I stand, a lot of what I hear is coming out of the side fill monitors in my own monitor box.
Yeah. So I just wonder whether or not it would be a real. Certainly, I imagine it would be a challenge to try to set up. A specific, while a tour is happening, try to take a specific occasion of doing that experiment, trying to get, the optimum recording of that.
You can't, because there's always one guy in the audience who doesn't want to.
That's right.
You're going to yell Dynamo Hum no matter what happens. And
that's true.
And that's part of reality.
Yeah.
Because a couple of times I tried to do that just to get a sample of it for the synclavier, and you can't make the audience behave. They're there for a good time. They're not there to record.
Sure, and they sell beer in the lobby.
Yeah.
What are the signals you use? I'm familiar with some of them. Like, I know that essentially means get ready, and that's the high sound. That's the low sound. What other ones do you have?
Well, if I go like this, that's play reggae. If I go like that, it's play ska.
Right.
And is 11.
11, sure.
And 13. And stuff like that.
Things like that. I've just seen you A chord or.
Yeah, you go C and you go A.
Do you do any other chords besides that? I've seen you do C and A. Those seems like the easy ones for that the hand would accommodate. Yeah.
Mariachi.
Oh yeah, and this is Weather Report.
How do you do? What's some of these other things I've heard? Mr. Rogers.
Oh God, what was the signal for Mr. Rogers? I point to my shoe.
That's pretty funny stuff. Okay, back to secret words. Shellfish.
If that was Paris.
Yeah.
And somebody had gotten ill from eating shellfish, and so there had been some discussion about this is one of the things you don't want to do when you're on the road, is go out and gorge yourself on raw oysters in places where the bacteria count is high in the water. Like, want to commit suicide, eat oysters in Naples.
Right.
Because of the raw sewage that's dumped into the...
Yeah. Okay, and we briefly mentioned cornhole from Mannheim. You said something about that, but I don't recall right now what that was about.
I don't know how that one came up. I mean, cornhole is one of those traditional stupid playground humor words.
Right.
Playground psychotic words.
You used quite a lot that particular evening.
Yeah. Well, that's what the secret word is for. You just abuse it. How far can you take it? How many times can you stick in the wrong word in the middle of a song and literally change the meaning of the song?
Do you think that doing that, you think that alienates very many people in the audience who...
Well, I know on one occasion it gave us one of the worst reviews we ever got of a concert, and certainly baffled and alienated a large portion of the audience in Paris when in 84, the secret word was Danger Will Robinson, from...
Sure.
Was it Lost in Space?
Yeah, we just saw a little snatch of that on television this morning.
Well, it's like the way Robbie the Robot's arms go. They go like this. They just flop around like that. And we were joking about that at the sound check, and I remembered it, and it cracked me up so much that through the whole show, all I had to do was just a little of this, and Ike was falling all over the place. And we really had a great time with it on stage, but the French critics, thought that it was just this horrible show.
They didn't understand.
Had no idea what it was, and so we were, to use one of the words made popular by Jane Fonda, we were excoriated for doing Lost in Space.
Right. All right, I got one last one, which is from Graz, which was Hairpiece.
Oh, did you ever see that Cheech and Chong movie where they played these two Arab brothers?
No, I don't think I've seen
No, not the Corsican brothers. They play these two Arab guys. Yeah, that's what it was.
You need a new hairpiece.
That's right.
So I'll have to see the movie to understand that,
Yeah.
huh? All right.
Wait, before you go off the secret word, do you remember the second show in Rotterdam where it started off with you introducing the band and you talked about how Ed Mann had screwed up the leg?
That's right.
And then the secret word became about rehearsal.
Rehearsal. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the thing is that was the first show in the tour where the band really let me down. They really started to play wrong notes, unexcusable wrong notes. And I started talking about maybe we should rehearse more. And for 2 or 3 days on the tour, everybody had their nose out of the joint. Like I have no right to tell them that they're playing wrong notes. Of course, they were playing, and Europe, people listen to the notes. They're more interested in musically what you're doing than.
You got 100-minute clips going here. I've got 90s. How do you want to deal with that? I think you ought to just stop the tape and stop the tape.
Holiday.
6 below in Chicago.
Well, you're asking for it. You're going back there with fucking laryngitis. They're going to send you back in a casket draped with a flag. Come on. Be careful.
No.
Did you know what
Pleasure to meet you, Ron.
you know what the CNN report said? The coldest day of the century.
When? Yesterday?
Yeah. It's that fucking ozone layer.
So, but I'll call tomorrow and see if Gail has that name.
Okay.
Bye. Yeah, we'll do.
Pleasure to meet you.
Take care. Good seeing you. Bye. Thanks.
Okay. Did Harry Andronis ever get his equipment wet?
Oh, yeah.
Good for Harry. During a rehearsal in Boston, you were fiddling around with a tune. I asked you what it was. You told it was an R&B tune called Diddly Daddy.
Yeah.
Who was that done by?
Bo Diddley.
Bo Diddley. Yeah. Oh. During Torture Never Stops, Lonesome Cowboy Burt, quite often there were these references to Tom Petty being the butt ugliest human being known to rock and roll. Where did that?
That was a line that Ed threw in one night.
It's just something he made up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless he got it from someplace else,
Right.
but it wasn't my idea. That's Ed's comment.
You described "I Left My Heart in San Francisco" as being one of the ugliest songs ever written. What makes that song ugly?
Oh, I'm just joking. That's not one of the. I think "Happy Birthday" is one of the ugliest songs ever written. That was a comment from the Munich show. When we got the audience to sing
I have
along
this one
with
as
it.
being from. I have the ugliest song. Maybe it was in Munich where the audience
Sang
actually liked it and you did it twice, or they had them
Oh,
sing with
no,
it or
that
something.
was one place where they really liked it. Yeah, I can't remember what city that was, but in Munich, I asked the audience to sing along, and then I said, "That was ugly as fuck." No, I think that was ugly as fuck. That's what it was.
Right. That was the jazz night.
Yeah.
Yeah. In Springfield and in Burlington, you're poking fun at Eric because of his shoes. What's significant about Eric's shoes?
They're very, very large.
What size are they, Eric? Yeah, they are big. 13s.
All right, but I lost them. That's why I left them at the hotel.
That's right.
Before that. That's what that was. I lose stuff all over the place.
In Portland, something happened that brought on the song "Stainless the Maiden."
That's
Tell
right.
me if again, I've heard a cheesy tape of this, so I have to use my imagination.
A girl walked up to the stage and handed us a Christian songbook. And so I thumbed through it and handed it to Bobby Martin. Well,
Pretty bizarre.
that's why it's in the show. If you're going to pick a Christian song, how about Stainless the Maiden, huh?
Yeah. In Providence, you told the audience that the local police there believe in the devil, that it said so on TV that evening. You remember what that news story was about? I assume it was a news story.
It was. I had done an interview prior to the show with some local television station, and they're the ones that told me that that had either a Satanism squad or something, related with the police and Satanism. It's just ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. Although your efforts to register voters was greatly successful, there were some problems, such as the League of Women Voters' objections to the banner which said "Lick Bush in '82," and some other things. Can you tell us about some of the resistance that you met with your
Well,
efforts to do voter
it was
registration?
regional resistance. I mean, one example was in Philadelphia, the registrar of voters for the area of the town where we were playing at the Tower Theater refused to send over voter registration slips because he said we already have enough registered voters.
Right, I
We
remember
like
that.
things the way they were. And the other place we had trouble was Washington, D.C., where the comment was made that we don't know about his politics, and so we're not going to send anybody over, and they withheld support. But we managed to get assistance from not the League of Women Voters there, but the Citizens Action Group. They sent registrars. And then in Detroit, we couldn't register because of the weird laws that they have there. You'd have to have a registrar from every suburb, and all different forms, and it was just impossible to do it. In Chicago, we couldn't do it because the registration had already closed. But just about every place else we did it, and we managed to register 11,000 people.
All in all, you felt it was pretty successful.
Better than none.
Yeah, definitely.
You know? And I got other rock and rollers to do it at their shows. John Cougar Mellencamp did it. Sting did it. Earth, Wind, and Fire said they were going to do it. I don't know whether they ever did it.
Do you have any plans for future voter registration drives, or doing anything else? Certainly, I would imagine for presidential campaign years that there's a greater importance attached to that sort of thing.
I'll find something to do.
Yeah.
Even talking about it helps.
Yeah. What about the show that was canceled from Richmond and moved to Towson? They said they claimed, I read some newspaper accounts of that where they claimed that it was for logistical problems, some other band playing, or
no,
it was something
bullshit.
like that.
The real thing was that was in the home territory of the PMRC, and the word got out that we were going to play there, and they got the school to cancel the gig. That's all it was.
You think so?
Yeah. By the way, did Jim Nagel tell you about the honorary doctoral degree that I was supposed to receive from a Catholic university someplace back east?
No.
And I was supposed to go there in March to receive this degree, and they were going to play some of my music, and they called back and canceled.
Called back and went, whoops.
Yeah. Well, we're not going to give that degree this year.
Okay. Speaking about Towson in that show, something kind of peculiar happened having to do with Bob Rice giving somebody an enema.
There was a
that
girl
kind of pissed you off, right?
Well, sure, because there was a female security guard who was hired to be part of the staff at the place. And Bob Rice, who was basically hired as a roadie, decided to use this enema that was dangling on stage as a prop. It was, actually it was something that I didn't tell them to put on stage, but the alto sax player had it hanging off of his stand. Bob went up there, took this thing, and he was trying to impress this girl security guard. And during the encore, when the guards were lined up in front of the stage facing the audience, he sneaked down behind the barricade and jammed this nozzle up her ass while right in the middle of this song. And I think that is inexcusable. And so I stopped the show and, told him to apologize and, don't ever do it again.
And then took on from there.
Sure.
Yeah. There were some good little musical inclusions that resulted with that too. Lyric mutations and such.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, there's the stochastic question. What's a screaming Albanian jizz weasel?
Well, it's probably one of those things you make up right on the spot.
Tell us about
That was Hamburg.
Let's see. That was Hamburg. Tell us about the dinner in Barcelona and the raffle that came later.
Well, the tour had been going on, and there was all this strife in the band, and the crew was edgy and all this stuff. And travel in Europe is really very rough for the crew. And so we had a day off in Barcelona prior to this television show that we were going to do. And I decided to throw a party for the band and the crew. And I rented this restaurant and told the promoter there to arrange to get 3 prostitutes. And prostitutes are a very common thing in Barcelona. And I said, get 3 prostitutes to come down to this dinner, and we're going to have a raffle that any members of the crew that would like to have the opportunity to get their machinery wet with one of these Barcelona hookers, that all they do is enter into the raffle. The girls came to the party, did a striptease, and danced. They brought their own music, and it's a whole bunch of hoopla, and and it was a straightforward business deal. It's like a rent-a-girl business.
Sure.
And the Markson, the monitor mixer, was one of the raffle contestants, and he won a girl. And so the deal was that after the dinner, the girls were going to go back to the hotel with the lucky winners. But what happened was Markson's girl took off. And after the dinner, see, everybody left, and they thought they were going to meet the girls back at the hotel. And I stayed around for a while at the restaurant. And about the time I was leaving, Markson was returning in a cab, and he was nearly in tears because his prize was gone. And this led to a situation where the promoter who had arranged this thing and assured me that everything was going to be a very smooth operation, became totally irate that he had been fucked over by the pimp who had supplied these girls, and saw to it personally that Markson got his machinery taken care of. And it took him an extra couple of hours, but Markson got taken care of, and so all was right with the band and crew the next day for the television show. And so during the show, we're making jokes about the raffle and Markson and that kind of stuff.
Right. All right. They did a video of that, and I hear also that there was one made in Madrid. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And did you get access to tapes of that? And will
the TV3 from Barcelona owes me a real master tape.
Mm-hmm.
They gave me a master tape after the show, but it was fucked up. It won't play.
Right.
And so I still have, I have yet to receive a real copy from Barcelona. All I've got is a VHS.
Right.
And the thing from Madrid was just a 3/4. Excuse me, I gotta go to the toilet. So I'm gonna turn this on. Scoring my first TV show for Jacques Cousteau, which I have to deliver before I go back to Russia on the 15th.
You're going back to Russia on the 15th of January?
Yeah. And Cousteau is going to be over there at the same time, and I'm taking a television crew with me. And I'm hoping to interview him while I'm there, and I'm going to get video coverage of all the weird stuff that I've seen in Moscow. And this is, even if I never get any of it on television, it'll certainly make an interesting honker product, because I'll show people a view of the Soviet Union they never even dreamed of before.
What sort of weird stuff have you seen?
Well, usually when you see stuff about Russia on TV in the United States, it's pictures of Red Square with tanks and,
Sure.
and all that kind of stuff. It ain't like that, I mean, there's like regular people doing regular stuff. There's musicians and painters and film directors and all different kinds of stuff there. And they're nice people.
Right.
So I hope to do some interviews with all different kinds of guys and just take the camera around the places that I've been, some of the art galleries, and let you know what the U.S. Media has not shown you all these years.
Some people have the image that everybody lives in a cell, and they're afraid to go outside.
It's not true.
It's just, on the surface, it's just like here, right?
Well, it's not. It would be like here if you could go out and get something to eat whenever you wanted to. There are certain difficulties there, but during the 4 times that I've been before, Stas, the guy.
Sorry, this is line 4 for you.
The guy who's been my host over there has showed me as many different kinds of Soviet life at different levels as anything I wanted to see, he would take me to see it. So I've seen the apartment of a famous artist there, and it might as well be like Manhattan loft, totally decked out, and the guy drives a Rolls Royce and the whole business. That's a unique case.
Yeah.
And then I've been to a building that has a group of communal flats, like typical communist communal flat, where different people or families live in parts of the room, and there's a list on the wall that shows which day of the week which resident has to clean the entire building, and which day of the week that person cooks for everybody else, and all this stuff. And
communism at work.
Yeah, real, it's grim, totally grim. And the guy that I went to visit there is one of the most famous of the film directors. in the Soviet Union, and he lives in this little box in this building. And the room that he lives in is just slightly larger than this. It's got a bed, it's got a table with a word processor where he writes his scripts, an acoustic guitar, about 50 books, and a bunch of paintings, and some, vodka bottles, and that's about it. I mean, I've seen all different kinds of things, and then I've been taken to all the people in the film business in Moscow. They have a restaurant where they all hang out, which is like an official government restaurant for people in the Russian movie business, directors, writers, actors, and so forth. And the food is fair, almost edible.
Yeah.
But the people go in there and they get drunk and they sing. Whole tables of people just sitting there singing their hearts out and just it's really weird. If you can imagine everybody in Hollywood eating at the same restaurant and singing, you could never imagine this. But that's the way it is in Moscow.
Whatever happened with the woman you told us about who has did the finishing?
The liquid?
Yeah.
She's still there, and I haven't been able to make a deal for her product in the West yet. And I told her that, so far, no customers.
It's still a mystery, though, how it works?
I've got the patent in Russian sitting in my briefcase right there if you want to see it. But other than that, I have no idea how it works or what it is.
Yeah. So I get the impression that that the Russian authorities have been pretty cooperative as far as, letting you see things and just in general.
I never had to ask permission for anything over there.
Yeah.
I mean, the permission you get is your visa to go there.
Right.
And to go there, somebody has to invite you. But once that's done, I was never followed around.
I can remember reading about somebody who was talking about being a tourist in Russia, who he was saying that you have to have their special in-tourist guide to take you everywhere, and so I assume that situation like that has changed, or
no, you no longer need that. I mean, if you're a part of a package tour, you would go through in-tourist. Sure. But if you're a business traveler, the person who is responsible for you on the ground is the person who invites you. See, and if you reciprocate and you want to have your Russian friend come to the United States, they can't come unless you invite them.
I see.
It's just rigmarole.
Yeah.
And then you're responsible for them when they're here.
In the last few months, where relations have definitely been improving with the Soviet Union, has that made things easier for you?
Well, I haven't been there since May or June. See, the first time I went was last February. So I went February, March, April, May. That's what it was. Once a month in the first part of '88. So I'm going back again in January.
I see. Then let me ask the question this way. Do you think when you go back that the improved relations between our two governments is going to have any effect on what you do there?
I don't know. Because unless you're there to see what's going on, you can't really judge what's happening in the Soviet Union by what you see on U.S. television. That's
Sure.
one of the reasons why I wanted to go in the first place, because it helped to refine my data filter. Now, when I look at news footage about anything happening in the East Bloc, I can really sniff out the bullshit that they're feeding to you, because I've been there and I've seen it, and I know how they try to lie to you in U.S. media about stuff. And so to say that relations have improved, well, maybe they have and maybe they haven't. I don't really know that unless I go there and see it.
Yeah. Certainly the impression you get from, CNN and everything else, television, newspapers and such like that.
Well, I think
sounds more optimistic than it did, midway through the Reagan era.
Oh, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But they don't have any choice, because it's just too obvious that things are changing over there.
Yeah.
But you still get the whiff that, especially on CNN, they wish the Cold War was still going on, and CNN broadcasts a lot of stuff that says Gorbachev is not going to last and we shouldn't trust him, and you hear that all the time. And I'm not convinced that that's correct.
I kind of wonder about that myself. I have a friend who, although I love him a lot, he's his politics are completely in opposition to mine. He's very staunch, arch conservative. And that's what I keep hearing from him. He's Gorbachev will never last. Guy will never last. They're gonna, have him out of there.
Well,
I just wonder.
let's look at the facts. Even if he's out of there, he has had his impact.
Yeah.
If they take him away, that ain't going to change what's happening in the rest of the Warsaw Pact.
It seems like, yeah. I mean, certainly even given what's happened just today with Romania.
But
or
I
yesterday
saw
with
that
Romania.
the first second that it came in on CNN. I jumped up out of bed. I said, "Yeah, only Albania and Yugoslavia to go." And Yugoslavia is halfway there. Albania is going to be the tough one to crack.
What about Bulgaria?
Bulgaria's going already. They've had their reshuffle. It's still not as widespread as what has happened in Czechoslovakia. People thought that Czechoslovakia was going to be a tough one to crack, and they gave Romania no hope in some New York Times estimate of how long.
Right.
So I'm overjoyed with this, but now the real communist stinker governments that remain, the big boy, is China.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah. You still got stinkers in China. You got them in Cuba.
Yeah.
And North Korea. These are real hardline regimes.
Yeah.
And it's going to take a lot to make changes occur there. But you can see that there's hope for China, because I don't believe that the average Chinese really wants to live under that authoritarian system.
What do you think about the recent developments with the trips to Russia that Scowcroft made?
Scowcroft going to Russia or China?
China. Pardon me, China.
I think it was a mistake.
I have sort of mixed feelings about it. I mean, on the other hand, it behooves a situation to at least have some sort of, we can't have any effect on them in terms of, helping democracy come along if we don't have, any sort of relationships with them. But at the same time, there is, something to be said in a moral vein about doing business with people who are, using their tanks and guns to suppress what happened in Tiananmen Square.
Well, let's just say that our foreign policy is not consistent, and it's not well thought out. I think that it's riddled with right-wing ideology, and when you have ideology as a block to logic, you can't really be effective.
Sure.
You have to look at all aspects of it. I mean, there's different ways to analyze every situation, and I don't think that the people who are in the business of analyzing or the ones who have access to power with that analysis have necessarily provided informed advisories to the guys who make the decisions. I just think that the whole way in which we conduct ourselves on an international level is very old-fashioned. It's arrogant, and we're going to be left in the dust because we need to rethink the whole way in which we relate to the other nations of the world.
In what way? In not being so much the speaking softly while carrying a big stick kind of a country?
We don't have a fucking big stick. Nuclear weapons are not a big stick.
True.
You can't afford to use that stick. Okay?
The use of nuclear weapons constitutes suicide.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's not a stick. So we have no stick.
Yeah.
We've got an army we just sent into Panama. We stand a good chance of having our butts whipped in Panama. Where's your stick? It's like being a joke. We shouldn't be the world's policemen.
That's true.
Nobody asked us to be the world's policemen. If you want to lead in this regard, look at the way those students behaved in China. They have a respect for the myth of democracy in the United States. If they actually knew how little people cared about democracy in this country, they probably never would have stood in front of the tank. But the legend of, America, the home of the free and the brave,
right.
that
hope
carried
that they have.
That's right. The thing that you have to lead people in other nations with your point of view is the moral certitude with which you conduct your business on that high level, not whether or not you're going to send in troops.
Yeah.
And if you want to have, let's say, ideological influence over the way...
Hey, Frank, can you pick up the phone?
Can you hand me the phone, please?
They're going to stretch.
Hello? Yeah. Not right now. I'm in the middle of an interview now. Okay, just save me some. Thanks, bye.
I mentioned Bulgaria a little while ago. I understand that you attended the concert of the
Bulgarians women's chorus, yeah.
Yeah. What do you think of that?
Well, I love the music, but I went backstage after the concert, and it was very, very depressing because it looked to me like the three male members of the entourage that were playing the musical instruments, the way they were dressed and the way they behaved backstage, it looked to me like they were secret police. And the behavior of the women, where they were lined up in these little rows backstage to shake hands with people, and it just seemed to me so controlled.
Yeah.
And it was that ugly aspect of communism that was dangling over the backstage aura of the thing that really turned me off. But I still liked the music.
The music, though, was good.
Fabulous.
Yeah, unfortunately, I missed. The tickets had been sold out locally where I live, and I didn't get a chance to see it. But I've,
Well, you know what it was like. You've heard the
I've just
CDs.
recently been turned on to the recordings of them, and I was blown away.
Well,
That's
can you
pretty
imagine
unique
walking
stuff.
into a room and sitting down, and lights go down, and here come 20 or 30 of these women dressed in native costume. No 1, 2, 3, 4, no big count off or
Right.
anything. Just no conductor in the first part. They just lined up, and what came out was an exact replica of that CD in tune.
That's great.
Boom, singing
Yeah.
it. I couldn't believe it. You know, there were a couple of minor fuck-ups later on in the show, and then they had a woman who was conducting the chorus in the second half, where they were doing it not in native costume but in concert dress. But it was astonishing, because anybody who's ever tried to carry a tune and stay in tune with no musical accompaniment has to respect that many people who sang that kind of harmony.
Sure.
Totally on the beat, just fabulous.
Yeah,
It was amazing.
in my school days participated in a cappella choir stuff, and it takes a lot of work.
This was Olympic grade performance.
I imagine.
No question.
Yeah.
And I understand that in order to join this chorus, they have every 3 or 4 years they have contests where thousands of women from all over the country come and compete for a job in this radio chorus.
Well, I hope they keep sending them around the world, because apparently there was a lot of respect given to them by the Western world. I read quite a number of newspaper
But see, they've
articles and
performed
such.
in Europe, many times before they come here. It's also part of our foreign policy to exclude certain types of performers from certain countries. I mean, the U.S. government has made it difficult for, let's say, punk or protest groups from even England or Ireland to come to the United States because there's certain things that we are censoring out of other people's cultures.
Right. Well. Okay, to get
Eric,
back
you're
to...
doing good. This is very well balanced from this point of view. The only thing that's really kind of disturbing is that rag at the top of the twig there.
Well, I thought that was a yellow ribbon for like the hostages or something.
No, that was I think that was a little marker that the salesman at the Christmas tree lot hung on it to say it was sold. Well, let's leave it on there for the hostages. For the new hostages in Panama.
Right, there we go.
For that CBS producer that we still don't know what happened to. It's good thinking, Eric. Just keep me honest here.
Okay, back to some musical questions. As Stage Volume 2, you released that whole unit of Helsinki.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any possibility that you'd consider doing that with one of the shows from 1988?
No.
Don't think so?
No, but what I'm going to do is put out an album called The Best Band You Never Heard in Your Life, which will be all stuff from '88, but from all different cities. And the reason for it is that there was no one show that was 100% fabulous. And I think that if you're going to listen to an album like that, especially of that kind of a band, the best way to represent that band is to take all of its primo performances and glue them together.
In Markson's Chicken, there is a vamp in, I believe, 21. Is that? And in Trouble Coming, you used one in 13.
Yeah.
Both of those had been utilized previously in, I believe, 1978.
Yeah.
And
also in Keep It Greasy, the Joe's Garage version.
I hadn't realized that.
Yeah, listen to Keep It Greasy on Joe's Garage and see
Yeah.
if you don't hear that.
Okay, good. Do they have any titles, or what are the origins?
Where
of those
did it
things?
come from?
Yeah.
Long time ago, when I was involved in this lawsuit with Warner Brothers, they had made it impossible for me to get a record contract with anybody. There was like a period of time when I was kind of locked out of the music business. And since I didn't have a recording studio at that time, and since I didn't have a contract and I couldn't go into a recording studio, in an act of desperation, I took my 4-track and hooked up a bunch of little dipshit equipment here in this basement, just like every other garage band guy would do. And I was making some, one-man tapes here. And that's where those things came from that period when I was doing little rhythm box tapes in the basement.
Right. Is there any relationship between 13 and the song Tink Walks Amok? Is there parts of that were utilized in that song too?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. What happened with the Albert Wing, I just have it written down here as Wing Pollock marriage that happened?
I haven't seen Albert since the tour, so I can't tell you.
I mean, was that a marriage that took place, or what?
I think that it was, I was shown a bogus marriage certificate.
Right, that's what I seen that prompted the question.
Yeah, that's all it
I was
was.
present at the ceremony.
Yeah.
I was in the hotel room.
Were you there? What happened?
You should be interviewing Eric. I mean, he's the eyewitness to most of the stuff that went on.
Just, in a drunken stupor, they were sticking together for the whole tour, and they wanted to get married, and Bruce was supposedly an ordained minister. And that's right, it was, I forget what town it was in, but there was this whole bunch of girls from New Jersey who were having like a bachelorette party. And we were just hanging around in the hotel, getting ready to go to sleep, nothing to do. And Bobby Martin said, I just found like this whole room full of girls who wants to hang out and drink, and hang and party. And we went to the room and we had a ripping party all night long. And it climaxed with this marriage ceremony. And Bruce Fowler, he performed the ceremony, and then he ate the pages of the Bible that he was reading.
Just to seal the deal.
And started chewing on them, and that was the marriage ceremony.
They didn't tell me that part. I'm sure that would have wound up on stage. They always leave out the good stuff.
Okay, who is Rondo Hatton? And you've introduced yourself as Rondo.
Rondo Hatton was a character actor from the old movies who had a disease called acromegaly.
I haven't heard of that.
Which is
like elephantitis.
That's right. He had a real big head and real grotesque head, and he was a character actor in some horror movies in the old days.
Mm-hmm. So why would you introduce yourself as him?
Why not?
Was he
Okay.
not the creeper?
I don't know what the movie was, but he was, one of these. He was at one period in American film history. He was the classic ugly guy. So
Okay, you've got
somebody had to carry on the tradition.
right. Okay, you've got, needless to say, a whole bunch of exotic items lurking in your vault, such as there's something like a conversation or definitely there's the videotape of Al Malkin demonstrating a blowjob on the banana.
Yeah.
And I think I've heard an interview where you're telling somebody about a tape that was made where who was it? Warren and somebody else are fighting over the girl that each one of them's trying to fuck.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, that's Al Malkin.
Right.
Yeah.
And things like that. What other kind of exotities are lurking down there?
Well, I've got a videotape that was made in the promoter's room in Pistoia, Italy, when he had refused to pay some parts of the crew and was in danger of not paying the band for going on. And the manager that I had at that time, Bennett Glotzer, had just punched this guy out. He was about a foot and a half taller than him. He just hit him in the face about 15 times. And I heard about this, and I told Thomas Nordig, who was operating the video camera, Thomas, go and take pictures of this. And so he dutifully went in there, and nobody believed that the camera was rolling. And he got coverage of this meeting of these guys. I mean, they have a table full of lira, and there's all these mafia-looking guys, and they're shoveling this stuff around, and this promoter is explaining in his very lame terms why he hadn't paid, and Bennett, like screaming at him, and Thomas just walking around there very calmly, videotaping the whole thing. I got that. And then a few years later, this promoter, whose name was Francesco Sanavio, came to Los Angeles and had the nerve to call up and say, can I come over? I said, sure, come on over. And I made him watch the tape. And he said, I didn't believe that there was any tape in the camera. And here he is looking at himself doing all this stuff. He's in jail now in Italy.
Never believe there's no film in the camera.
Right.
Never.
Not with Nordic, that's for sure.
I'm kind of surprised that you didn't have somebody doing a Thomas Nordic in '88.
Because there's only one Thomas Nordic.
Yeah.
And he was working for Warren Cucurullo.
Or just someone lurking around with a video camera during that tour.
Well, see,
I
couldn't afford to do that because Thomas did it because he wanted to do it, and he was getting a regular salary to be the keyboard roadie on that tour in '82, '81 and '82, and he just decided to get into video. And he wasn't paid any extra money for doing it. It was just
volunteer effort on his part.
Something he loved to do. And if he hadn't been that deranged about doing it, those tapes wouldn't exist.
Yeah, more power to Thomas. That was some good stuff came out of that.
Yeah, he's a fabulous guy.
Yeah. We've heard this thing called Lost in a Whirlpool or Lost in this Whirlpool.
Lost in a Whirlpool.
Lost in a Whirlpool.
Yeah.
Okay. And what are the origins of that? Was it like a demo tape or something?
No, it was the very first... it's the earliest tape that I have a copy of from when I first started taping stuff.
From the Cucamonga period?
No, that's 1957.
Really? That's the date on that?
That's right. And Lost in a Whirlpool was taped on one of those tape recorders that you have in a school in the audiovisual department.
Sure.
Okay, well, we went into this empty room at the junior college in Lancaster after school and got this tape recorder and just turned it on. And the guitars are me and my brother Bobby, and the vocal is Don Bleat.
This was reel to reel?
Reel to reel, 1957.
And you composed you wrote the words?
Well, the story of Lost in the Whirlpool goes back even farther. When I was in high school in San Diego in '55, there was a guy who grew up to be a sports writer named Larry Littlefield. And he and another guy named Jeff Harris and I used to hang out, and we used to make up stories, little skits and stuff, little dumb little teenage things. And one of the plots that we cooked up is about a person who was skin diving. San Diego's a surfer kind of an area. It was skin diving in the San Diego sewer system and talking about encountering blind brown fish, and it was kind of like the Cousteau expedition of its era.
Right.
And so when I moved to Lancaster from San Diego, I had discussed this, scenario with Vliet, and that's where the lyrics come from. It's like a musical manifestation of this other skin diving scenario.
Sure. What about another thing we've heard similar to that, which is called "Falling in Love is a Stupid Habit"?
What is that?
Yeah.
What is it? I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, that's from what I understand, it was a demo tape that you made for Jimmy Carl Black. That has, what I've heard is apparently you playing up, sitting and chording at the piano, and sort of humming some words. You're not familiar with this?
That's not me.
No.
Never.
I'll be darned.
First of all, I don't play the piano.
Yeah.
So it ain't me.
I'll be darned. Okay. Are there any compositions from... Huh? Okay. Are there any compositions from the Grand Wazoo, Waka Jawaka period that we haven't heard, that either weren't released on the albums or perhaps weren't played live, or, anything from that area that's still lurking out there, unlistened by your fans?
There's actually... When the Grand Wazoo did its tour, I think 5 cities, there was some reel-to-reel tape made of that. And there are some, live recordings of that band, but they'll never come out. The quality of the tape is not that good.
Yeah.
And
they won't be released because the quality is subpar.
Yeah, it's just, they're more like souvenirs than real recordings.
Right. You plan on doing any more lecturing?
I've got a letter inviting me to Chicago for 3 days to Chicago University sometime next year. I don't know. I may do that. I occasionally get invitations to be speakers at graduation and things like that.
Right.
But
you've said that you consider that any type of organization of material could be construed as
As
a means of composition.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you could do that you could construe as composition, as something that could be thought of on those terms, that you could do that would be like lecturing or like something else that would be public performance or in public view that you could do that wouldn't lose you $400,000 when you go out on the road
Well,
to do it?
you know, the thing about lecturing is there's no overhead. I mean,
Right.
just about, you know, it's probably 80% profit of what you get for going out. But at the same time, I've got a rate that I charge for going out and speaking, and it's a
Sure.
minimum of $15,000. So there's only certain places that have the ability to pay that kind of rate. Because in order for me to go there, I have to stop working here.
Right.
You know, it takes 2 days out of my life to go and come back and to do this kind of stuff. And, you know, that's what it costs to get me to show up someplace and talk. And
That's the parameters of that.
yeah.
What about doing something sort of lecturing with the synclavier or something to that?
The minute
something
you
like
involve production, the minute you have to have an audio manifestation,
Right.
you're talking about overhead.
Yeah.
You have a crew, you have the PA system, you have the trucking for the PA system, you have the sound check in the afternoon to make
Right.
sure it all works.
All
And
that
now, you know, the whole idea of going in and just talking to somebody. Well, you know, I tried it once before with digital tape. You know, the whole idea of going in and just talking to somebody. Well, you know, I tried it once before with digital tape.
You did something like in Santa Monica, and
No.
you did one up in San Francisco.
No, I also did one at the college in Northridge. And one out
Yeah,
there.
sure.
And,
Yeah.
you know, the unusual result there was the people didn't want to listen to the music. They just wanted to talk. They wanted to ask me questions. So, you know, basically I had to shut the music off and sit there and answer questions. So I think that there's a different kind of an audience that comes to see me if I'm just talking. And I'm always happy to answer the questions because that's usually the funniest part of the thing, you know, for me
Right.
to give it. I don't really like the idea of giving a speech.
Sure.
I'm happy to answer questions, but you know, it seems a little bit presumptuous.
What about the
climb up
speech
on-
you did for ASUC? Did you have fun doing that?
Well,
It was
that
a great speech, by the
that
way.
was a different situation.
Yeah.
I mean, they begged for that. They
Yeah.
asked for it,
Yeah.
and so I wrote that thing out, and you know, really,
It was pretty spiffy.
yeah, I
That's
piled
something
that
that
one
one
on.
of these days I want to go back to my college, to College of Marin, where I met Scott, and play the tape that I have of that for some of my instructors. There's some of them who wouldn't want to hear it, but there's a couple who would laugh along with me on that.
Well, the result in Ohio was most of the people there didn't want to hear it either. In fact, the way it was done was I was at this little podium, and then on the stage with me, seated in chairs, was the music faculty, you know, sitting like a bunch of puppets on stage, and
Yeah.
they didn't know what I was going to say, and they did not enjoy it. And actually, there was quite a bit of backlash at the subsequent banquet, where I was
Right.
forced to sit at a table with some of the composers that had attended. And the more drunker they got, they started attacking me at the table. It was really quite laughable.
Really?
You know, people with their mouth full of peas and you know, just getting vehement over this stuff, and it was pathetic.
They must have been squirming while they were sitting on stage.
Yeah, they were squirming, but I mean, I don't believe that what I said was really off
It wasn't
the mark.
damaging. It was, like I say, I think there's some of the instructors that I had that could listen to that and take it with a, as tongue in cheek and not worry too much about being spoofed in that regard because it's because basically it's all pretty true.
The people take themselves too seriously. Come on, have a laugh for a minute.
Exactly.
I mean, you know, if you choose to be a composer in the United States, you have to know before you start doing that you're not buying into a life of glory.
Right.
You're really entering into society at lower than the bottom rung of society because, you know, drug dealers have more respect in the society than composers
Sure.
do. Because at least they perform a useful function for somebody, but who needs a fucking composer?
Right. We've heard talk about some possible things that you were thinking about releasing. One was Phase 3.
Hmm.
What's the status on that?
I did some more work on it 2 weeks ago. As a matter of fact, this German documentary basically concerns itself with the putting together of Phase 3.
I see. Yeah, I guess actually we've heard you talk about that on numerous occasions and what you always seem to say is, well, there's new Synclavier stuff that
It's
I
not,
want.
well, that's
Yeah.
a fact. It's not done, and I'll tell you that
Yeah.
the material that's in it it's so unique, and I think the concept is, it's a real special album, and I don't want to release it until I've optimized it.
Right.
I mean, I could have put it out a year ago, but I would have regretted it, just because of what's come along with the software on the Synclavier.
Well, that gives us good reason to be patient.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, it's not like I'm lazy,
What else is gonna come out as far as live recordings from 1988?
There are other.
Another, like a Broadway part 2, or
No,
the best band you never heard.
The major thing from '88 is going to be the album "The Best Band You Never Heard," and the stuff that doesn't go in that, some of the oddities like the "Make a Sex Noise" from Binghamton, and maybe even the medley that we did with "When Irish Eyes Are Smiling,"
right,
coupled with "The Godfather."
Sure.
That's more stuff for, you can't do that on stage. I think "Stairway to Star Wars" is also more for, "Star Wars Won't Work" is also
right,
for, you can't do that on stage.
Right. How about the mystery CD? You were thinking about making a CD of those two
mystery
discs? Yeah.
I got a little problem for next year, which is it's our 25th anniversary year, and the major goal is to have the entire catalog out, and so that's releasing a lot of material. And it seems like the mystery disc would be something that would fit into that, but it would be a lower order of priority than the rest of the stuff that's coming out.
Sure. How about the lost episodes?
That, I think, will come out next year. I think that's something that people should get a hold of.
That you feel pretty determined to want to complete and
it's
get
done.
out there. It's done. And we heard about something, Keneally told me about something that you were thinking about called Cover, where you had even envisioned a Manhole cover supposedly as an album cover, and then having all cover tunes.
Well, occasionally I think about doing things like that, but it seems like too much work for too little result. I mean, it's something that I would laugh at, and maybe 10% of the fans would laugh at. I think most of the fans would be more interested in hearing new material.
Yeah. Definitely, your fans really liked. I think I can vouch for the fans in saying that people really did like Broadway the Hard Way a lot. Oops. I need to flip there. I should have gotten this ready. Thank you for doing this interview.
Hey, it's the least I can do. If I've got a fan, I owe them this.
Well, there's a lot of other people who don't look at their fans quite that way.
Well, they're wrong.
Can Jim tell you what we're going to do with this? With the magazine that we're putting out and everything. Well, basically, it's a fanzine that's we meant to get you some back issues you could look at. It's been put out already for the last 10 years.
Oh, I have some of the back issues of
Society paper.
Yeah, of the Norwegian version.
Right.
Yeah. And they just can't do it anymore, for various reasons. And they offered us the opportunity to take it over, and we decided to do it. And we're just going to maintain a lot of integrity, both technically and spiritually, whatever. Eliminate all the bootleg ads.
This is something that I was going to say. Is probably you've seen some of these things, other fanzines and Zappalog and things like that.
Yeah.
And the one thing that we are all in absolute agreement about, that we want to do differently than what other people have done, is that between the three of us, we don't like bootleg records. I'm trying to find the right word to describe it. That we have definitely helped our education as far as understanding your music by the way of getting these cheesy tapes that are done in concerts, and the other things that are kind of collected and passed around like baseball cards and what have you in a little grapevine that exists.
I don't mind the grapevine. What I do mind is guys who actually take this stuff and try and rip me off and make a profit from it. They're also ripping off the fans because they're getting substandard versions. This is going to be great.
We don't deal with people like that. Even if a lot of people they'll press a bootleg vinyl, an album. I go into record stores and there's stacks like this, alternative they call them. That's bullshit. And also a lot of people who trade the tapes will do it where they'll You send them 2 or 3 tapes, and they'll send you back one filled up with material.
It's what's commonly
And we don't
known
do
as
it with
the
those people
2-for-1 deal. You send them 2 blank tapes, they'll send you back one with music on it. And essentially, I look at that as being it's translates into money. It's the same deal.
Not only is it immoral, it's illegal. That's the unauthorized recording of sound.
That's right.
Profit is made.
No question. It's a violation of 2 copyrights. It's a violation of the C copyright of the composition. It's a violation of the P copyright of the master tape, which I own. So, of the performance.
Right now, and and at the same time, we certainly from my point of view, I have to admit that that I perhaps feel a little bit less than pure as the driven snow, because perhaps having some cassette tape that was recorded in a concert, and trading them around might be certainly from a lawyer's point of view, breaking some of those copyright regulations and such too.
Well, look, it depends on what the intent is. If the intent is to rip me off, then I hate it. If the intent is to find out what's going on, then I think it's fabulous. I'm glad that somebody takes an interest in it, and I'm glad they enjoy it. And whatever I do, it's for other people's enjoyment here.
Great.
But just like anybody else, who wants to get ripped off?
Exactly.
I'm not interested in bending over.
Sure.
So there you have it.
That's great to have you articulate it that way. It's something that I've sort of thought that you probably felt that way, but never heard it articulated that way. So that's nice to have you put it in words.
And the 3 of us, we're the ones running this, and we're strictly operating on a not-for-profit basis. Any money we take in, we're either going to hold it and use it as, to improve the quality of the magazine, or if we have money left over at the end of the year, we might have a party, an annual party, where everybody can get together. But we're not taking any money for our own self out of it.
Well, even if you could make a profit on it, I wouldn't mind that you did, because you're doing work.
It's a labor of love.
Yeah, but if you're doing work and you make a profit, I'm not going to say, "Hey, Eric, what do you,
Right.
Make a profit." Capitalism could be a very good thing for you.
Okay, here's something I've asked you about twice, and always just and both times gotten kind of an answer that just sort of fluffed things over. So I want to try to sort of pin you down on this. I would really like to get a hold of scores of your music, but in the way that you currently put out sheet music, it's really expensive, and a guy like me just simply can't afford it. Is there a way?
There is no other way.
Is there a way? Well, there's these things called pocket scores. Needless to say, you know what those are.
Sure.
They're small. I just wondered, given the fact that you've got the synclavier and with computer printing, if there is a way that cheaply those scores could be reproduced and printed off and put in some little form, like a little pocket score that we could send away to Barfka Swill for $10 or $20 or something that we could afford, and be able to look at scores to those pieces.
I wish.
Yeah.
There's no cheap way to do it, because in order to prepare the pocket score, you have to go through preparing printing plates and doing all the rest of that stuff. Okay, the total amount that it would cost me to prepare in that medium is in excess of what I could make from selling pocket scores. So if you want to have a score right now, the only way to do it is to have it reproduced from the actual Onion Skins full-size score, which I don't do it. I have to send it out to a place called Judy Green Music, and they duplicate those things, and it's very expensive.
Yeah.
A full-size score is about $250.
Right. So I suppose they're just the limitations on that is that you need to have enough people who are willing to spend the money to pay for the overhead of having that done, and the overhead is a little expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not something that you can solve with a synclavier, because in order for the information to be in the synclavier, someone has to type it in.
Someone has to type all that stuff in there.
That's right.
Yeah.
And they get paid lots of dollars per hour for doing this work. So there's no easy way to do it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that satisfies me on that.
Does that pin that answer down for you in the most?
It doesn't make me feel any better, but it relieves my anxiety of thinking that the question hasn't been poised to you in a way that you really understand what it was.
It just means that in the past when the question was asked, I was not doing well at answering it. But I think that if you want to see what the scores look like while you're here, I'll march into the other room and you can look at them. But
the kind of thing that I like to do.
Follow music.
I have showed a few people who don't have musical training in their background. This is something that Scott and I used to do in school a lot. He was somebody who I used to have a lot of fun doing this with, which is listening to music and reading along with the score on it. And that's just a wonderful thing. You
Yeah.
know, one of the things that I like to do is I like to listen to Pink Napkins and watch that music
Go by.
in that guitar bass. It's beautiful.
Mhm.
You know, and it's not so much thinking. You know, a layman can do this because you don't. Somebody who can tap their foot 4/4 and know that 4 of those taps come in every one of those measures can sit there and be too trained to be
Yeah.
able to learn how to do that. And I've always found it to be a really a wonderful experience to have that visual counterpart for the music. You know.
Well, I wish I could provide
Yeah.
it, but first of all, the sales of the orchestral albums is very low, meaning there is a very small portion of the audience that's even interested in that kind of
Right.
stuff. Secondly, the cost of preparing those scores, out of all the people who have bought the orchestral albums, I'm sure that an even smaller percentage of them would
Obviously.
want to have a score.
Yeah. Not
Given-
as popular
like,
as
if-
Beethoven.
Well, that's
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
But given the choice between spending 10 or 20 bucks for a score, or 10 or $20 for an album of something, most people would spend it for something to listen to rather than
Sure.
something to read.
Of course.
And this is
Well,
it's not AT&T here. We have limited resources of
course.
what you can spend to.
well, I'm really grateful to Steve Vai and I guess who was the clarinet player? What's his name?
David Ocker.
David Ocker for doing the work on that they did for the guitar book.
Yeah, and also another copyist was Richard Emmett, another very good copyist.
Well, definite thanks to those guys, at least from me, for certain. Here's another thing that causes people like us who like to archive stuff and collect stuff and know what stuff is, that sort of causes us headaches and gives me a little bit of a challenge, which I like, which is the fact that certain songs wind up having different names as time goes by. A good example of that is Mond being put out on a recording as Let's Move to Cleveland,
Yeah.
and also being known as Krigabandola. How does that happen with songs? Is that something that's done purposely, or just what happens with that?
Okay, well, the song that's got an interesting history. 1968. I can't remember the guy's name, but he was a concert violinist. He asked me to write something for him. So I started writing a piece for violin and piano. And that's where Mond came from. Mond is, when we finally got I never completed the piece for violin and piano, but there was enough of a group of sketches for the thing that I could, at the point where I had a band that could actually play it, I could build the stage arrangement out of the group of sketches that were originally destined for violin and piano.
Right.
The first band that tried to play it was the band with Roy Estrada, Terry Bozzio, Napoleon, and Andre Lewis.
Right. Sort of a prototype of what came later.
That's right.
Yeah.
And at that time, it was called Canard du Jour.
Ah. Yeah, I'd heard that phrase and
Duck of the Day.
yeah.
So that didn't go very far. And then next time I had a band that was capable of playing it, it was a band with Vinny as a drummer.
1980.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, Logeman was a drummer in 80. Vinny came along after.
Yeah, Vinny was there in 78 too. I guess 79.
Yeah. Mond is a concept that was developed by Caliuta. You know the drummer on The Tonight Show, Ed Shaughnessy?
Sure.
Okay. Ed Shaughnessy is Mond. A guy who wears a leisure suit with an enormous medallion. That's Mond, according to Caliuta. So the
Right.
title was Young and Mond, the idea that a person would be Mond before their time.
I see.
Okay?
Yeah.
And that's why we used to sing at the end, so young and Mond.
Right.
Okay? But you talk about obscure. How are you going to get that concept across to anybody other than sit and do it in an interview like this? Kriga Bandolo came about as a result of a conversation with Ike about the old Tarzan books, where all the fake native talk that they used to have in the books. That's the way natives talk in Tarzan books. Kriga Bandolo, white men come, fire sticks kill. All that kind of stuff. And then Bandole Bafabanto was contributed by Ray White, who claims that it is a Swahili expression meaning white people taste good. Or white people are good eating or something. I don't know.
Right.
But that was a joke that he contributed. So We did that for a tour. And then Let's Move to Cleveland. We got tired of singing Kriga Bandolo at the end of the song, and it was just like the secret word would be on those shows in '84, we would change what we would sing at the end of that song. It wouldn't always be "Let's Move to" something else. It could be anything, but you get a bunch of syllables that'll fit that part of the song, and you would just sing it. And that audience in Cleveland was so good, that's the reason why we sang it at the end of that performance. Let's Move to Cleveland.
Right.
So,
okay. All right. Let's see, some other things that you've done that with. Mogio, what's new in Baltimore?
Mm-hmm.
I had some conversations with Scott early in that tour and asked him about that. And he told me that as that was being rehearsed, that it went through several names. If memory serves me right, that it started off as being Mystery Studio Song, then went to Furnished Singles, and then N'est pas déranger. Is that correct? In French, saying "Do not disturb."
Yeah.
And then I guess you changed. Then I suppose for releasing it on recordings, you broke the thing in half, kind of released one as Baltimore, one as Mogio.
Yeah.
So that's the evolution, title-wise, of that.
Right. Now the story about what Mogio is, that's another
tell us that
strange story. One day, when Diva was really young, she crawled into bed with us, and I was going to bed like 7 o'clock in the morning, and she had been sleeping in bed with Gail during the night. And as I got into bed, she was just waking up, and she was telling me about this dream that she had a tiny little father named Mogio who lived under the pillow, and went on with all of this stuff, and gave me this complete scenario about this little character that she was familiar with, and so that's where the thing came from.
Yeah.
Then I found out a couple of years later that one of the bus drivers, in fact the driver on the '84 tour, that was his name. His last name was Mogio. Mojo or something like that. It was so weird. It's not a normal kind of a...
Heard someone say it?
No, I mean, she wouldn't have heard me say it.
Cosmic coincidence.
Yeah.
Okay, of things along this line and having to do with Diva, she came up with the concept for Chan and the Bourgeois.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet I don't quite understand about some aspects of that, of like the French talk and all that. What is that all about?
Oh, fabulous.
This dog is so cute.
Oh, look at that.
Member of the Zappa
Look
family.
at that face. Ooh. Oh boy, you're a beauty. Does Doggis like her?
I think so.
Is it female?
Yeah.
Oh, this is so
What's
adorable.
its name?
Do I have to name it now on the spot? How about Spot? Oh, it's so cute. Look at those.
Toaster might be good.
Toaster? All right.
Desmordo's good.
Can I hold her?
It's so cute.
It does at the moment have a little bit of a wind problem.
Frank, can I just tell you how awesome this dog is?
How awesome
No one
is
could
it?
find it in the store.
Really?
It escaped and ran out to us. Like outside, we were outside at the escalators, out of the store. Found us. Okay?
They wanted to come home.
Totally found us. And like,
somersaults.
the woman was like panic stricken and like came outside and said, is that your dog? Is that the dog? And we go, yeah, we didn't buy any other dogs. Did you guys come in and get it? I go, no, the dog just ran out here.
What a cute little dog.
I knew though when Gail called on my machine.
Eric Buxton did the tree. The dynamic Eric.
This dog is so cute.
Yes, but it's quivering. It's nervous. It's like sensitive. It doesn't know what's going on here.
Lopsided.
Yeah, well, after it's, gotten acquainted, have the cats batted it yet in the nose?
No, not yet. I just knew.
Ooh, that dog does have a breeze problem. No wonder it's quivering.
How many pets does the Zappa household have?
Well, that's going to be dog number 2.
Right.
And let's see. We've got a white cat named Tweezer, which is actually wild, and it doesn't come in the house very often because the other cats don't like it. But it eats outside every morning about 5 or 6 o'clock.
And its name is Tweezer?
Tweezer, yeah. And then there's the legendary marsh moth, the all-black one that sits on your shoulder and drools. And she is now commuting between our house and somebody else's house, and she occasionally comes over and drools all over the place. And then there's there's two black and white cats. One's named Spot, which is a male, and that's one of the reasons why Marsh Moth isn't here so often, because Spot's been chasing her out.
Right.
And there's another black and white Persian called Fighty Bitey, which is the cat that rules the roost. She swats everybody else around. And there's a gray and white cat named Bill.
Yeah, I met him.
Yeah, that's a nice one.
Yeah, he's real nice.
And we have a snake and a turtle.
What sort of a snake?
Gopher snake.
Yeah.
It came in as an infant. It sneaked into the recording studio one day when the door was open, and first we thought it was a rattlesnake,
Yeah,
baby
they look
rattlesnake.
like it.
And then we looked it up and found out it was a gopher snake, and Diva wanted to adopt it, so we got a terrarium and we put it up there. It's up in the back of the kitchen.
You've been able to feed it.
Baby mice,
Yeah.
and pinky mice are called.
Yeah, sure.
And now it shares this tank with a turtle, but it's getting so big that I think we're going to have to allow it to go back to nature, because when it gets hungry, it'll now snap at Diva. It bit her the other day, so she can't play with it anymore.
Right.
Snake?
Okay, back to Diva and Chana and the Bourgeois. What's
Yeah.
the explanation on that one?
Oh, putting the French stuff in?
Yeah, just what's the general meaning of that song?
Well, the meaning is let's entertain ourselves. I mean, the whole story of Chana is not contained in the song. The only part of the Chana story that Diva told to me was she lives in a tree.
Right.
She's 9'3", and the other parts of her story that she told, that Chana is a ghost, and that the things that Chana does, they're not included in the song. So I just took part of it and then extrapolated it out into something else.
Were all you kids as creative as she is at this age?
Well, remember Frogs with Dirty Little Lips was Ahmet's idea.
Sure. Yeah, I saw you rehearsing that, I think, in Berkeley the day before that was performed.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first time I got to sit on one of your rehearsals. And, we were dying. We were in hysterics on that one.
Yeah, I think that's a nice little song. But the secret part of Frogs with Dirty Little Lips is there's a musical joke in there. Da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da.
Sure.
And that is a type of cadence that was used in very ancient music. It's called the Landini cadence.
I'd heard you use that phrase before and wondered what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know what a cadence is.
Sure, of course.
So the ones they use today, plagal cadence,
right.
And, the other. So the Landini had this funny resolution, and it's a sound of medieval music that I always enjoyed. But if you do it over and over again, it's no longer a cadence, it's a hook. So
exactly.
It's now the Landini hook that's in that song.
All right, let's see what else we got here.
Did you ever find a name for Moldred or a place to use that name?
Moldred?
Yeah.
Not yet.
You've been toying with that one for a while, huh?
Yeah, well, they come, they go. If
Maybe the new dog could be called Moldred.
That doesn't look like a Moldred. It's a cute dog. Just got to get that fucking dietary problem straight. That dog can.
Probably what they fed him in the store.
Yeah, must have been a burrito.
Yeah, what's Jack in the Box ring job?
Okay, there was an advertising campaign in 1969 of billboards all over Los Angeles that showed this bag with onion rings dangling out of it saying, "Stop into Jack in the Box for a ring job."
Oh, that's hilarious.
I heard that interview you did with Flo and Eddie in New York, and you mentioned that, so I figured I had to ask you that one.
Yeah.
Pretty
And
mysterious.
these were just advertising rings?
Onion rings, yeah.
That interview that you just did, where Flo and Eddie called you, you all sound like you're enjoying that. A lot of good laughs all the way around. I understand that they had did some rehearsing with you previous to the '88 tour.
Yep.
And why didn't that work out?
Because they decided it would be bad for their career.
They were doing the nostalgia tour
That's
thing,
right.
Yeah. Figured that they would do better doing
Well,
that.
I believe Howard made the statement that, he didn't really feel that he could go on stage at this point in his career and sing songs about blowjobs and, keep his new young audience. And fine.
Such is life.
Yeah.
Okay, would you say that Conlon Nancaro is the predecessor of what you do with Sinclair?
Not completely. I mean, certainly there's a huge influence conceptually in what Nancaro did. In fact, when Nancaro was in Southern California, I tried to get him to come over so I could demonstrate the machine to him, because here's a guy who pioneered a type of sequencer music using a player piano, but it's a limited timbre. It's only the sound of that one instrument. And I just thought that the way his mind works, if he would learn how to use the synclavier, you would be able to hear all different kinds of things out of him. But I never got him to come over, and I doubt whether he's ever going to get into it. But I have to tip my hat to him. Certainly.
He lives in Mexico City, doesn't he? Yeah. Yeah. He's come up with some interesting stuff. How did your association with Slonimsky come about?
When I was invited to be the host of this Edgar Varese memorial concert.
In San Francisco?
No, in New York, at the Palladium.
Oh, yeah.
I erroneously thought that since I was supposed to be introducing the works, that the audience would appreciate some background facts about his life and stuff like that would be informative, not realizing the typical New York audience that would appear would be more, hey, Frank, all this kind of stuff, and they didn't want to know.
Right.
But I didn't know that, and so to prepare myself for this, I knew that Slonimsky lived in Los Angeles, and since he conducted the premiere of Ionizations, I thought I would meet him and talk to him and get some inside information, and that's how I met him.
I see. Yeah, okay, yeah, that's right. I had heard somewhere that he had conducted that premiere.
Yeah.
I see. Back in 67 or 68, the Mothers played some music at Grammy Awards, where you guys supposedly did some real bent version of Satin Doll. Can you tell us about that?
Well, we were hired as the entertainment at this Grammy Award show, and Duke Ellington was actually in the audience, by the way. And was it Woody Herman, I believe, was the band that would play the music when people got awards, and we were brought on to do a little 15-minute set. And this is a room full of people in tuxedos and all fancy.
This was before the Grammy Awards was more of a rock music oriented thing, right?
That's right. Yeah. Remember, in the old days, they didn't even want to give you awards for rock music, you know, and it's only recently that I think they're even talking about giving awards for rap music.
Right.
They're not exactly on the forefront of musical expression.
Exactly.
So, we did our show with broken dolls and rancid versions of, just the type of ugliness that we used to do in 1967. And after our set was over, I walked out, I think it was in the Hilton Ballroom where we did this, and I walked out of the stage. I was on my way to the toilet, and this woman in an evening gown was walking towards me, and as she passed me, she said, under her breath, "That was the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in my life." I went, "Hey, you, come here." And she stopped in her tracks and walked over to me, just right up to me. And I stuck my face right in her face, and I just as loud as I could, I said, "You're a pig." And she was stunned. And it was like, the result is like if you took a wind-up toy and hit it with a hammer, and it went crazy and started twirling around in the room. She didn't know where to go. She was, and she was just going around in circles out there in this lobby.
Oh, God. Oh, my. That's pretty funny. We heard a little thing that you used to open up the shows with, I believe in 78, called either Revenge or Attack, for the knick-knack people. What is it Revenge or Attack? Can you clear that up?
I can't remember.
Okay, how?
Because my tapes in there just say knick-knack.
Knick-knack, okay.
Okay, remember I told you about that period when I couldn't get a record contract and I was just doing little shitty experiments here in the basement? That's part of what I was doing, is gluing those little pieces of tape together.
Doing that editing.
Yeah.
When were the things that you glued together, when were those recorded? At that same time or something?
No.
I mean, I get the feeling that stuff sounds lumpy gravy-ish and
it's all earlier sound sources.
Yeah. And was that put together for the exclusive use of, putting on at the beginning of shows, or
no? It's
just
just
a project
together,
that you did?
It was just a sound object that I wanted to make, just chopping tape together. And then, since there was no way to release it anyplace, and I thought people might enjoy, hearing it, we used it to open the show.
Right. Okay.
Say it was Curse of the Knick-Knack People.
Curse of the Knick-Knack People. All right. You said emphatically that you're pretty distraught with the result of working with LSO and all those problems. Did you feel any better about what happened with the concerts in Berkeley in that orchestra? Did they treat your stuff any better?
Well, look, Kent is a very fine and dedicated conductor. And the Berkeley Orchestra really put a lot of effort into it. But based on what I heard on the tapes, I mean, some parts, for example, of Mo and Herb's Vacation and Bob and Dacron, they're playing them better than the LSO. Faster, more accurately, but all in all, there's just not enough time or enough money to get everything nailed down to a really
Still
perfect.
the same basic problem.
It's the same basic problem. It's an enormous amount of notes that you have to learn to do a whole evening of that stuff. And when it's all unfamiliar, if the evening would have consisted of one of my pieces and all the rest things they already knew, then you could have probably had a better result from the concert, because there's less material they have to learn from scratch. They've already played Beethoven's Fifth, so there's never a problem there. But anybody who's a composer faces the same thing. If the music is brand new and nobody's ever seen it before and they don't know how to play it, and if you're writing in a idiom which is not a familiar idiom, you're going to have performance problems. You have to be realistic about it.
What about the visual content of it? How much did you enjoy that, the puppets and such?
Well, there were certain parts of the puppet show that they couldn't finish on time, like the Enormous Wives from Mo and Herb's Vacation. They never completed those things. And so everything that was in the scenarios that was written for the ballets, it wasn't all there. But that was just another budgetary thing.
Right. Okay. Let's weed through some of this stuff.
What's Dwell?
What is Dwell? Well, Dwell is a screenplay, and it's extracted from the Them or Us book. And what I've done is I put together 102-page screenplay that I've brought up to date. In fact, I worked on it about 5 days ago and made some changes in it. Sent a copy of it to my new screenplay agent at ICM to see whether he'll send it around. And then a couple of days later, Beverly D'Angelo was over here, and we sat around and she read through the whole script, and we had a bunch of laughs. She'd never seen it before.
Yeah, I saw her on Letterman the other night where she had said something about, I wasn't really listening to it, and she said harder than, she said the words harder than your husband.
She sang it in this new film that she just did.
Okay, it's a film.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll be waiting for that. What about the three groups that you had back in the early 70s, one of which is commonly known as the Hot Rats Ensemble? Was that a proper name for that group?
Yeah, we only played a couple of shows.
Right.
We did San Diego, and we did Olympic Auditorium.
And then there was the Grand Wazoo and a scaled-down version of the band that came into the Petit Wazoo. Is that, again, the correct way to think of that band?
Yeah.
Okay.
What was the inspiration for Evelyn, a Modified Dog?
Let me think about that. Good question. You know all the people inside the piano in Lumpy Gravy? Okay. Picture a dog sitting in the corner watching human beings do that.
We spent the day at the Los Angeles Zoo, and the orangutans were doing that. They were looking at us like, what are these people doing? This constant procession of people looking at us.
They're in there going, what a miserable life, walking past cages, looking at a...
Yeah. Tell us about a composition that the Old Mothers used to do, which you called the string quartet, which we know of as Pound for a Brown, Sleeping in a Jar. Why was that called the string quartet?
Because it was written when I was in high school, and it was a string quartet.
I see. So that's the origins of those two compositions. The melodies that we would associate with those two songs originated from a high school string quartet.
58.
I see. All right. There's also something that the only title that I've ever heard associated with it was something that was just loosely called ballet music, which was some themes. Are you familiar with that and what that was? Can you tell me anything about that? Came from the same time era.
No, a little bit later. That eventually wound up in Gregory Peccary. Those things were written during the '69 tour.
Okay. Also in Gregory Peccary, there's a part of that Grand Wazoo was playing, which I think of as being New Brown Clouds. Mm-hmm. Was that, at that time, a composition unto itself, or was that part of Gregory Peccary?
It was part of Gregory Peccary.
It was, so...
Gregory Peccary was written in 1972 while I was in the wheelchair.
Uh-huh. Ah, I see.
And so was Hunch and Toot.
Yeah. Okay, speaking of Hunch and Toot, who were the vocalists that you worked with back then, particularly the female vocalist? Who was that?
I can't remember her name. Brooke.
Was it Florence Marley?
No, that was from a movie.
No.
From Space Boy or something.
Florence Marley. That she was in this science fiction movie where she plays a vampire from Mars.
What about the string quartet, which you wrote, called None of the Above? Mm-hmm. Then there's the wind quintet, Time Speech. Mm-hmm. Will we ever get to hear that?
You'll hear a piano version of Time Speech in Phase 3.
And why? There's a performance that was done of two movements of that in Washington, D.C., I believe, by Aspen Wind Quintet.
Yeah. It was written for them. They commissioned it.
Oh, they commissioned it. Mm-hmm. I see. Okay. Yeah. What's the origins of Sink Trap Gypsy Airs?
All the music that was put together for the Lumpy Gravy album, these were done in segments. Excuse me, I'm trying to finish eating my candy here.
Oh, feel free.
All right, let's see. It was 66. This guy named Nick Vinay, who was a producer at Capitol, came to me and offered me the chance to write something for a 40-piece orchestra, to do a recording of that kind of stuff. I looked at my contract with MGM, because we were signed to MGM at that time. Nowhere in my contract did it preclude me from being a composer or a conductor. So long as I didn't perform on an album that was released by another company, I didn't think I had a problem.
By performing, you mean something with an instrument?
Right.
Yeah.
I wasn't singing, I wasn't playing.
Right.
Nonetheless, MGM refused to allow this album to be released, and there was an argument over it for a year, finally resulting in MGM buying the master tape from Capitol, and then I added the vocal parts in there and it came out. But in '66, I used to live in this little house on Kirkwood, and I was renting this place. And this is right about the time Vinay offered me this opportunity to write this music. I thought, well, this is fabulous. I'll just dive in there and start composing my little buns off, and I'll get this performance. Well, shortly after receiving this commission, the landlord notifies me that his son, who is a dentist from the Midwest, is moving back to California, and we should get out of the house so he can have his son move in. So I got evicted, and I have to move. I've got a deadline to do the recording session. I've got all this music to write, and I got no place to do it. So Lumpy Gravy, all the music for that was written in these locations. The office adjoining Nick Vinay's office at Capitol Records after 6 p.m. because they had a little piano in there, and I would go down there and work in there for a few hours. Then I wrote part of it at the Tropicana Motel with no piano because we had to live there. And then I took a short-term rental on another house in the canyon just prior to the recording sessions, and I was writing around the clock, and I had copyists coming over at 3 o'clock in the morning to pick up, chunks of the score and go off and copy parts.
Right.
Okay? And so, to answer your question, where do these titles come from? You got to name these segments something, because you have pieces of it going out the door. It wasn't one whole finished thing, because it had to be done in an assembly line process. So, there you go, Sync Trap.
Had to be
Name it something. Get it out the door.
Identified in some way.
Right. It goes back to what Varese used to say when people say, "Why do you call pieces density 21.5 and ionizations?" He said it serves as a convenient means of cataloging the work. You could call it Buddy. You could call it Moldred. You could call it Bill. Or you could call it Sync Trap.
How about the apostrophe? Was that like that, or is apostrophe a concept?
Well, apostrophe is that funny little thing that dangles at the end of the word, denoting.
And it has very certain functions.
Yeah, has functions. Denotes ownership.
Ownership. Okay. Is that what you were thinking of?
Yeah.
Getting back to Hunch and Toot, are there any other songs that we'd be familiar with that came about from Hunch and Toot other than Flambe, Spider of Destiny, Planet of My Dreams, and Time is Money? Anything else besides those four that we...
None have been recorded.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, wait. There's another one that's in the script that's Think It Over. If something gets in your way, just think it over.
Sure.
Well, that's the Grand Wazoo theme. That's
right.
that gets sung
As
to.
you were saying, I think it over. I was trying to think of what that is, and that was what you called what we think of as Grand Wazoo at the time it was being performed live.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. Let's see.
But the other songs that Hunch and Toot sings, like the Hunch and Tootin' Blues and Oh Me, Oh My, The Lonely Spider Wanna Die, those have never been recorded.
All right, here's a controversy you can settle. There are many people who think that you performed in 1969 at a festival in Belgium called Amages, performed on stage with Pink Floyd. True or false?
Not with Pink Floyd.
That's what I thought. You introduced Beefheart to the audience.
Yes, and I introduced a lot of other acts too. But see, that was a very weird thing. I was hired to be a master of ceremonies.
Gotcha.
This is after the Mothers had broken up, and I had time on my hands. These people contacted me. They offered me $10,000 to be an MC at a festival and all expenses paid, and go over there and whatever I wanted to do. And I said, fine. So I get there, and what they neglected to tell me was nobody spoke English. I mean, most of the people there spoke French, and all I could do was point and wave. And furthermore, the festival was originally supposed to be in France.
Right.
The French government stopped it, and so at the last minute, it was moved across the border into Belgium, into the middle